Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to Guidance Cast and another episode. We've got a very special topic today about our mindset, or the Islamic mindset, and building strength from within that translate to our lives and being successful. And it's about avoiding problems. So, often we think we can't do things, or the self-sabotage, and just thinking negatively. And this is really important topic that we all need to hear about, especially balancing the Islamic values and then the sort of methodologies that practitioners use in, mindset sort of coaching. So we've got somebody very important and relevant today for this. We've got Brother Waqqar Mirza, who's originally from Bradford, who's a Muslim, I would say, mindset coach. So, Assalamu alaikum, Waqqar.
Walaikum assalam, Shaykh. Thank you very much for the kind introduction.
MashaAllah. Just tell us, first of all, before you go into all of this topic, and very important topic, a bit about yourself. So I said you're from Bradford. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, originally from Bradford. Family of six, the kind of standard Asian family, big family and everything else. And I'm now currently a mindset coach, and I deal specifically with Muslim men. And the topic of self-sabotage is my speciality.
Right.
Other than that, I'm a father of two young kids.
MashaAllah.
I moved to Manchester when I was about 18 and I studied here, and I ended up staying here because I just...
Okay, you in university here?
Yeah, university.
What did you do at uni?
International business.
MashaAllah.
Manchester Met.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of eye-opening.
Yeah.
It's one of those things I didn't really want to do, but I did it because I thought I'd get out of Bradford and study and everything else. And,
I think a lot of them come from Bradford to Manchester for uni, MashaAllah.
But alhamdulillah, it was very good because I met a lot of good people, and the degree itself was very eye-opening.
Right. So, and then you lived in Manchester after that?
Yeah, completely permanently.
Yeah, permanently moved. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think I purchased my first place after uni, and then I stayed here.
Okay.
Got married, settled here, worked here, and then I came across guidance for here as well.
MashaAllah, yeah. So you've been to our classes and courses.
Yeah.
You used to play football with us back in the day.
The 24-hour football challenge. Yeah.
We played quite a few games, MashaAllah. Yeah, you're quite good on the pitch, MashaAllah.
Yeah. I remember when you injured that poor kid from Rochdale.
You still remember? Yeah. I need to tell everybody that, MashaAllah. It was accident.
Yeah, but it was good times studying here under guidance of under yourself and other teachers that came here for a couple of years.
MashaAllah.
Remember, I used to come quite regularly. I came here, Rochdale.
Yeah. And I think you came back as well with your missus afterwards.
Yes, I did, yeah.
And brought her to classes as well, yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Alhamdulillah.
She was actually... She studied, or she comes from Algeria, so she's Maliki fiqh.
Maliki fiqh, yeah.
So she wanted to understand what's going on with the Hanafis. They're reading all these namaz. And
when we put the poster out for the thingy podcast today, a brother commented saying, "Oh, he was in class with me like so many years ago."
Yeah,
right?
Must have remembered.
Recognized you from the picture on the poster. MashaAllah, alhamdulillah.
So now, I'm now here mindset coaching Muslim men.
Right, okay.
I don't want to go into too much details now.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to talk about. So
that's it, good. Yeah, no. So, alhamdulillah, it's a very important topic. Like I said, there's so much issues in this field, in terms of depression, suicidal thoughts, just, Muslims shutting down, not wanting to engage, some identity issues as well, that which hold us back. So there's a lot of things to discuss. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, please join in, please share the link. We really want everybody to benefit from this particular podcast a lot, because I think it's very, very important. I've got to deal with a lot of this myself. I've come across brothers all the time, especially brothers that, just seem on a downer and just seem like they can't do anything in life and like look lost. I said lost is the word I'd use. I think that's exactly the kind of thing you're about.
Yeah, so I deal with people who struggle with self-sabotage. That's the main umbrella. And there's a lot of factors that play into it. Now, just to give you a kind of idea about how serious self-sabotage is and mental health within men itself, as I was discussing earlier on, there's, I think, 3/4 of suicide are men within the UK. And that's like a leading cause of death.
For men. So 3/4 of men that die in the UK is from
suicide.
Wow.
And they age between 35 and 50.
Right.
Under 35 and 50, that bracket. And it tends to be things like substance abuse and other issues that kind of work into that suicide. Right. Self-sabotage is one of those that has multiple phases to it. And we don't even realize we're doing it. It's a subconscious thing. And with Muslim men, especially in nowadays generations, there's so much pressure in terms of leading the household, your deen, working, providing, and pressure and societal pressure, and everything's changing so rapidly.
So I'm hearing the word self-sabotage a lot, and you said it's a big thing. So just break it down a little bit more for our viewers. Yeah. What are the kind of things that people do to themselves to sabotage themselves? What is it that goes on in the mind or the heart or the thinking? Give us a bit of an idea. Because I think I can relate to some of that. Maybe in my past I've thought of things which are negative.
Yeah.
And when I say self-sabotage, I don't mean like suicidal. I mean, I haven't done projects, I haven't taken decisions.
Yeah.
I look back and think I should have done that, but you didn't do it.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. So just to give you kind of a definition of self-sabotage, it's not a character flaw. People think it's a character flaw, and that's where it gets very deep and dark. Self-sabotage is actually an unconscious conflict between two parts of yourself.
Okay.
So your conscious brain thinks of logical solutions, and your unconscious brain wants certain things like your soul. So you have, for example, a goal in life, like a project, for example.
Yeah.
But your unconscious self has past issues and traumas or beliefs, limited beliefs that stop it from achieving that goal.
I can see what you're saying, yeah.
So like, for example, you want to hit the gym, right?
Common example. Yeah.
Perfect example. But instead you'd rather procrastinate, watch TV, have a burger, something like that. That's stopping you from achieving that goal.
Kind of describing me and many people out there.
Yeah. So that's how it works. So it's a conscious intention, but it's because of your unconscious conditioning that it affects your actions. And then what happens.
So let me ask you a question here. So it's self-sabotage, although it sounds psychological, it's not a problem. It's just that clash inside.
It's a clash. That's right. It's a subconscious clash.
Subconscious clash.
Clash. And it's basically like an inner conflict between a protective strategy that you've developed over time and your action that you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And that protective strategy prevents you from doing something. So it's not a negative. It's almost like a positive thing, like protection.
Yeah. So you intend you're trying to be just safe. If it's like business, you don't want to take a risk, lose money.
Exactly.
And then you don't end up doing the business, so you can't make the money. But you thought that was the right decision. It actually, from an Islamic perspective, sounds pretty much like an ego problem or a struggling against your nafs kind of thing, the jihad al-nafs as we call it.
Yeah.
Because we know our nafs is always pulling us in different directions and wants certain things, like not to go to the gym or to enjoy oneself here. And then that stops you from achieving good things in life, doesn't it?
Exactly.
So I think it relates very much to like an ego in its internal sort of struggle.
Yes, definitely. And this is what causes unhappiness. And then that's what causes like depression, anxiety. And it presents itself in different ways. For example, procrastination. People have an issue with being lazy or procrastinating. Perfectionism is another one, where people try to get everything perfect before they're ready to go. And that can really prevent you from moving forward. You've got things like avoidance, low self-esteem, trauma, fear of failure, which is a big one.
Yeah.
Especially
I think sometimes I do this. I'm maybe saying a bit too much maybe, but I always talk to myself in a negative way.
Oh, this is it,
Yeah, like I think, you can't do that, don't do that. You kind of talk yourself out of things.
Yep.
Which is like exactly self-sabotage. You
need
you need to do this. Help me, because I can feel it. When you're saying it's more like projects I'm thinking about or decisions in my personal life, family life. Nothing major. Like I think there's a lot of people have different issues and problems,
different levels.
But I do think that I've not done a lot in my life in even Islamic like teachings and activities and projects.
Yeah,
because we've got so many ideas sometimes. You just talk yourself out of them, and you have an idea, you took yourself out of it. You have an idea, you think, I can't do that one, it's too ambitious or this. So I think like those things you're saying, they do result in the end of feeling like, I've wasted my time. I haven't done anything with my life. You know, I've lost out in a sense, and then
you question yourself.
Where do you go from there?
Yeah, well,
it's a bit of a like emptiness. I don't know. Like
this is it. You hit the nail on the head again. It's your inner critic. Sometimes it comes across as inner critic and what we call cognitive distortions.
Okay. So fancy words, cognitive distortions.
It's a very fancy word. So a cognitive distortion is simply how you use a protective mechanism to stop yourself from doing something, or how you see things through your internal filter. Yeah. So for example, a very common one is generalization. And this is, for example, I'll relate an example to ourselves. So like, for example, we believe back home in Pakistan, everybody's bad and they like this and they like that because of an experience that somebody else has lived or we've experienced.
Yeah, very true.
But then we generalize about
this restaurant's not good, don't go to it because of the reviews and stuff like that.
So then we generalize about everything.
Yeah.
And that can prevent you from actually achieving something.
And experiencing it for yourself.
Exactly, and experiencing it for yourself and actually having a personal experience and learning something from that. And that can cause a lot of internal conflict and internal dialogue and internal voice that you have, internal critic. That's another major one. Like you said, you start to be very harsh on yourself inside your head.
Yeah.
And you become so harsh on yourself, you stop doing something. And I'm sure there's an Islamic link there as well in terms of...
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that Allah doesn't change the condition of a people until they change the condition within themselves.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's more relating to Iman and shukr and blessings. but it is an internal decision you make,
Yes.
and change you go through that reflects on the outer, what happens to you outwardly. I think that is
Yes,
what's happening here.
Exactly.
Like, we know from a spiritual perspective from the Quran and our teachings that we've got to look after the inner and the thoughts and the spiritual side, which then will positively reflect on the outer. Like, it's what, as they say in Islamically, what's in the heart manifests on the limbs, right?
100%.
So if you've got a pure heart, as the Prophet said,
Yeah.
then the whole body becomes pure.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got a corrupt heart, or that flesh is corrupt, which is the heart, then everything else becomes corrupt. And what that means is, if what's going on inside isn't quite right, things are not going to go quite right outwardly. Doesn't mean
Yes.
like physically there's a problem or corruption or disease.
Yeah.
It means the spiritual sort of translation of thoughts and mind and spiritual. Because I've got to add the heart onto this discussion from an Islamic perspective.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think that's something which is really important to understand, that there is an Islamic principle behind this. So I think one of the things that people might be tuning in thinking is, where is all of this, like, practitioners and mindset coaches,
Yeah,
how is that related to Islam,
Yeah.
and how authentic is it, or whether is there any contradictions or clashes and so on. So on that note, what made you kind of actually go down this road? And ask you seem like you know a lot of stuff and these
Yeah,
words are
it's,
nice, but what was your journey in actually
It's
going?
interesting because personally, for me, I'm going to talk about myself because I think it's probably the best thing to do out of my personal experience. So
Yeah, share as much or as little as you want.
yeah, that's fine. I'll try to keep it as sweet and simple so people don't
Yeah.
get bored. But alhamdulillah, I think growing up, when I look back at my life, alhamdulillah, I've had a lot of good and I've had a lot of challenges. And as a kid, I was very kind of like reserved. I was an introvert. And then I grew up and I changed, and you change over life, you experiences and stuff like that. And I think I suffered from a lot of self-sabotage in the past.
Right.
And I still do. And I think it's knowing now that I know how to handle it. So, for example, I had a lot of social anxiety before, but now I know how to handle it, how to prepare for it. There's a concept in what I do called anchoring, which is being able to associate your brain, your unconscious mind, with a state that you like to be in. For example,
Right, okay.
confidence, happiness,
Okay.
that kind of thing. So, for example, people, when they go for a talk or they have presentations, how do we put ourselves in a state that we can be confident when we're talking or publicly speaking?
Yeah.
So some of these concepts that I've put in my coaching, my program, I've suffered with myself, so I know how it can affect people.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest ones is actually negative self-talk. So for me, for example, I remember one example that stands out massively was, I remember when I went for an interview for a business analyst, and I'd smashed the interview online and everything else, and I had the video interview coming up, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be the next big jump for me and everything else. And then when I got to the interview, I was like, all these doubts started kicking in.
Yeah.
Like, it was crazy. Like, I was literally doubting myself and thinking, I'm just not going to do it.
Wow.
And then I ended up turning away that opportunity.
Wow.
Even though I had the skill and everything to do it, and it was the next jump up,
Yeah.
I just felt as though I'm not good enough for it. And that happens to a lot of brothers out there who are...
So then your own
that
journey and
frame.
experiences,
Yeah.
you did something about it,
Yeah.
but now you also want to share that and help others.
100%, yeah. I mean, I studied NLP,
Yep.
which is neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah, we'll come on to that. Yeah.
Yeah, come on to the end of it. So, and I found that, alhamdulillah, it was such a powerful concept and way of treating certain things that I couldn't deny how good it was. And through my journey, I learned how it connected to Islam, and using that, now for the last 2 years, I'm helping other brothers overcome certain issues in their life, personal, professional, even sports. It links in with a lot of different things. So it's helped me a lot, and it's helping other brothers a lot. So I believe there is something there that we can put back into our community.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And help people move forward.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
So now that you're a mindset coach, you're helping others, what is sort of the issues you've seen in our community? Like, what is going on? What are the challenges that brothers are facing? What's the sort of root kind of problems that you see in our community?
I think if I was to list them, there's quite a few, but I think one of the biggest ones is identity conflicts, overthinking and fear of judgment, and cultural expectations.
Wow. There's a lot of you put a lot of stuff in.
It all interlinks, you see, so it's hard to separate them because they all interlink, and that's how the brain is.
Yeah.
It's like a big, massive mystery to us, but we try to make sense of it. And even, for example, a distorted self-concept, which is the concept of the self in Islam is quite big.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can shed a lot of light on that.
Yeah.
But a lot of us, because we grow up, and this is talking about from my personal experience as well,
Yeah, definitely.
you grow up from immigrant parents as a Pakistani in England
British society, yeah.
society. So are we
And the
Pakistani?
norms here, yeah.
Are we British? Are we Muslim? What are
Yeah,
we?
we've had these discussions before. I think
Yeah.
it's really important to actually reiterate that and kind of go into that sort of rewiring almost of who
Yes.
we are, because you came to the classes. I'm sure you learned a lot in the classes and
Yeah.
the Islamic environment, the teachings of Islam that helped you kind of recalibrate a little bit or think a bit
Definitely,
more
yeah.
Islamically to what is actually your identity. And what I'd say is that we often talk about the sort of Islamic identity, and then we talk about the cultural sort of things, or, you know, sort of communal, our environment, the UK, right? So we've got the UK environment, we've got our culture, whether it's subcontinent, whether it's Africa, Arab, whatever, and then you've got your religion. But there's something that I think we miss in this conversation, the Prophet talked about, which I think you maybe do go into a little bit into your sort of stuff, is that natural state of a human being, which the Prophet called the fitrah.
Fitrah, yeah.
The fitrah. I'm sure you go into that and talk about
A lot,
that,
yeah,
a lot.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So that came to mind because Islam reinforces the fitrah. So there's a fitrah before, right? Meaning every human's born on purity. So if you don't know what fitrah is, and think for our audience, we should talk about this because it's a big part of what you do. I could tell it was, even though you haven't told me that before, right? Because it just fitted in with whatever you were saying. And the fitrah is basically Allah creates human beings, and the way we are created as, you know, children, as, you know, pure beings, is purity basically.
Yes,
it's the
yes, yes.
pure human state, which is untainted, you know, not manipulated or influenced in any other way other than naturally accepting there's a creator, there's a purpose to life, that, you know, we've got to be healthy, we've got to be helpful, we've got to be responsible. Everybody just grows up in a good environment without being influenced in a worldly sense, a capitalistic sense, a greed sense, would be this pure state. But that's the thing, we have all these other influences which kind of are tugging away at our realities. So we're trying to find out which one it is. And what Islam says is what is your natural human state, which is the purity. And this is something really important I want to say, that we all actually created with good in us.
Yes.
That's the natural state. It's not a evil state we're created with. We've got to purify. We're created with good. We're created with this huge potential to do amazing things as worshippers of Allah, as communal, you know, support members of our society, as parents in the future. So that's something really important that you know, we're talking about identity and all these. I think that's something we miss out in this discussion, because we always go to the Islam and modern society and culture, and we forget about, look, you're as a human, who are you? Right?
Yep.
And the fact that they've come on today just clicked that, you know, that's a lot of what you would be talking to people about and trying to get them to realize.
Well, this is it. I mean, most of my work is rewiring those
Yeah.
perceptions, beliefs, and thoughts, which result in actions and behaviors. And I was speaking to a brother earlier on about the exact same thing, about some of the principles about the positive intention.
Yeah.
So one of the underlying presuppositions, as they call them in NLP, it doesn't mean it's the stone cold truth. It means this is just a presupposition, which is something you assume, is that every action has a positive intention. So when I work with clients or with other brothers out there, you try to find that positive intention, and there's a specific technique to do it. And it's very, very powerful because it actually breaks down all the layers like an onion. You peel away the layers and you get to that positive intention. So again, it links back to Islam.
Yeah,
and
so
how
that
deep it
also
is.
reminds me of another element of Islamic spirituality, which Imam Ghazali talks about a lot. I'm sure you've probably come across it. It's called the khawatir, this idea of passing thoughts through the mind,
Yes,
and how they affect your decisions. And sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative. Sometimes they call them angelic and the satanic kind of thoughts here and there.
Yeah.
It's quite a technical subject in Islamic spirituality. It's quite deep, but it goes back to that mindset and how we think. And Islamically, there's a huge element of that. And I'd say the rewiring starts Islamically from Tawbah. You know, as a Muslim, you want a clean slate.
Yeah.
And you want to build from a clean slate. You don't kind of want to get rid of the negatives and the baggages and, you know, all the kind of stuff that may not have gone well in life. And I like the idea that we're talking as building and positive. Like, we're not saying you're something wrong with you as a human, or there's a gap or something. No, we're saying you have it. It's about discovering it, right?
It's about it. Exactly. So I work from a viewpoint of a person is whole. You have all the resources you have to be able to succeed and move forward in life.
SubhanAllah, mashallah.
Not from a place where you're broken.
Yeah.
So when we work from a place that you have those,
So this is quite different to psychology then.
very different. So
Yeah.
psychology traditionally is based on Freudian theory and, you know,
Yeah,
Jungian
Freud,
theories and
big
things like
influence
that.
on psychology, yeah.
And they kind of focus on the fact that you're broken. So when you go to a counselor or a psychologist or psychiatrist, they'll always ask you why. Why do you feel this way? How do you feel?
They're looking for the problems and the brokenness to
So,
fix it.
But what happens is it's almost like a self-sabotaging cycle, because you're asking, what's the problem of the problem of the problem? So people sometimes, brothers come to me and they're like, we're sick of going to counseling because they're just asking the same questions and we just give up.
It doesn't feel like you're moving forward and building. Yeah.
Exactly. So where I work from is that you have the resources. All my job is, when you come to me, you tell me what your problem is, where you want to be, and it's the in between,
getting you there, positively moving forward.
And to do that, I need to find out what's going on inside.
That reminds me of like so much prophetic advice and hadith that you mentioned, the intentions.
Yep.
You know, the Prophet said, don't, la ta'jaz, don't give up, don't be helpless and incapacitated.
Yep.
It's a beautiful hadith. And actually, I want to quote this hadith. I think it's perfectly relevant to where we are in this discussion. The Prophet ﷺ said, I read it recently in a book I was teaching, so I know it fresh in my mind. Al-mu'minul qawi khayrun wa ahabbu lillahi min al-mu'min al-da'if. That the strong believer is more beloved and better with Allah than the weak believer. Wa fi kullin khayr, but there's good in everyone. The Prophet said that. Even though you might be weak, what did the Prophet say? There's good in everyone. And then he said, Ihris ala ma yanfa'uk. Be keen and eager for that which yanfa'uk, benefits you, nafa'. So he didn't say like, it's been positive, right? Be keen on that way too. Wala ta'jiz, and do not become incapacitated, ajiz, I can't do it. Procrastination, giving up, feeling like you can't do it. The Prophet said, La ta'jiz, do not do that. It's actually the words of the Prophet ﷺ. And then I believe the hadith goes on to say, and don't say, if only it had been such and such and such and such, it would have been like this, like that. Like reminiscing, saying this would have happened, that would happen. فَإِنَّ low, because low, like, which means if only, like had it been like this, opens the door for the work of shaitan. يَعْمَلُ يَفْتَحُ عَمَلَ الشَّيْطان.
I see that all the time.
This is the thing, like when you were saying there, that this hadith fits in quite perfectly into that whole experience that the Prophet is telling us as Muslims. This is how you should be doing it, and you're kind of taking the steps. And this also now probably goes into that question of the Islamic values and what you're doing, and NLP you mentioned, and these techniques and so on. I think it's all about bringing out the good in us. And that's an Islamic thing. The Prophet ﷺ gave advice. Even another example comes to mind when often we talk about the decree. I don't know if that's some conversation that comes up with Muslims around you, but people are, it's already written for me, or this or that. So people came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said that question, like, if it's all written, Messenger of Allah ﷺ, what should we do? What's going on? What the Prophet said? Go and act. I'malu, go and do something. Go and don't you sit there and think it's written. No, that's not your job. That's our belief. But Allah has asked us to go out and do something, pray, fast, help others, work, make a living. That was the advice of the Prophet ﷺ. So being proactive and acting and not sitting around just letting the thoughts get to us is a very prophetic way of looking at it's the advice of the Prophet ﷺ.
It is, and it kind of reminds me of the principle that we use. It's called action brings clarity.
I love it. Action brings clarity.
If you're sat there not doing something and it's perfectly in sync with praying or giving zakat. So if you're sat there doing something and you're thinking of doing something, get up and just do something. Like,
that just reminded me of myself. I was saying earlier, I've got projects and this and that. And recently I did something. I went online, so I was looking at some things. And before I wasn't doing anything. And I started, you have to pay for some things, right? So I paid for a package or whatever. And all of a sudden, things are moving forwards now, right? Because I've taken action. Exactly what you're just saying there. Before I was just thinking, I don't want to spend, £20 a month on this. So that
you're overthinking.
Thinking. Then as soon as I thought, let's just do something, right? So literally just like, let's just do something. And I did something, and now it's giving me so much like positive thinking or reinforcement that I want to carry it on now. I want to go back to it. I'm eager for the next step.
You're energized.
Yes, exactly. So I think that's really important that, you take the first steps to whatever you want to achieve, because those first steps really do open like a lot of clarity or light, as they say,
on the road,
motivation, energize. I love it. I can resonate with that. I mean, I'm just talking about a simple little project, but I think people have a lot of issues, a lot of difficulties, a lot of obstacles for bigger things in life.
But this is it.
It all works in a similar sort of principles.
You're right. I mean, the principle, the underlying principle to a lot of problems and issues are all the same. It's just the level of the problems differ depending on the level of the person and their issue, personal problems, business problems. Relationship issues, that kind of thing. So it depends on the person themselves. And the way I work with people is to make them understand that these principles can work in any aspect of life. And like I said, once you start doing something about it, that's what happens. So I give people an action plan. We set goals, we do it, we
Yeah.
crack on with it, and then we deal with everything on the way.
Okay, so on that point now, let's move into a bit more details,
Go
right?
on.
Let's
Yeah, yeah.
let's look at what you kind of do, but keeping in mind, because I still think we need to talk a little bit more about NLP
Okay.
and what that is. So give us a little bit of insight into like NLP and how some of the techniques, I don't know what you call them, like you use.
Okay.
You don't have to give us everything, but just
Yeah,
give
yeah.
us an idea. Like, you're saying there, I give a plan.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's based off what you've learned in NLP, in your mindset coaching.
Yeah.
And so give us kind of a look at insight
So
to that.
I'll give you a brief like summary of what NLP is, so it's
Yeah.
a better understanding for people out there.
And I'm listening carefully because
Yeah.
I'm trying to, assess what you're saying,
Yeah.
because I've not really assessed it or anything, right? And I'm trying to pull out the sort of, is that Islamic
perspective,
value
yeah.
there? Is there something behind that? And I'm sure our listeners, please do get involved and comment and share. Look, if you've got something that resonates, like I can,
Yeah.
literally I can feel a lot of
Mention
what
it.
you're saying is relevant to me in many
Yeah.
aspects of my life, then please share or comment or ask a question for Brother Waqqar, inshallah ta'ala. So yeah, NLP, your techniques, give us examples.
NLP was made by people who got sick of therapy. There were psychologists and psychiatrists who wanted something more effective.
Okay.
And it's in three parts. It's neuro, linguistic, and programming. Neuro is to do with the brain, how it functions. Linguistic is to do with the power of language. And programming is how that language programs the brain. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, but programming through language, the brain, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
And what
Which look, if I've just heard those three words and I'm thinking the Prophet ﷺ telling us something and programming us, because he wants us to think in an Islamic way, in a positive way.
Yes.
Allah's revealing ayat in the Quran to help us think in a particular way, right?
Yes, exactly.
Our morals and values as Muslims.
Programming our software, our
Yeah.
internal software, so our actions are congruent
I like
with
that internal software.
Yeah, internal.
So we're literally, we've
Yeah.
got so much inside that impacts what we do outside. doesn't it?
Exactly, and it's concerned with the internal software, like the programming, and
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the Quran is the big, linguistic programming of our internal state. So within NLP, you have presuppositions. I'm going to mention a couple of them because there's a lot that we could talk about, and it could go on forever.
Okay.
But one of them is the map is not the territory. So that basically means that everybody's internal representation of life is different to another person, and we have internal filters. For example, our five senses.
Okay.
Our beliefs, our language and self-talk, which you touched upon earlier, our physiological state and our pre-existing mental habits and patterns. And this then gives us a map of what the world is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the reality.
Right. So it's how we're processing everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for example, me and you could see something, I don't know, a color, or maybe you could see a situation.
Yeah.
You'll see it differently to me.
Course,
But that's
yeah.
because of what you've learned, your
How we
knowledge,
process it. Yeah.
your senses and how you process it. And I will see that differently. So me as a coach, it's my job to understand what's going on in your head,
Yeah.
to understand your language.
I think that's very
to
true
fix it.
because I often look at things from a very Islamic perspective, right? And people may look at it from a very sort of cultural or their own sort of, like you said, knowledge,
Filters and lens,
upbringing,
yeah.
filters and lens, and that comes from yourself, people around you, your education.
Yep.
Because obviously I've studied Islam for so many years. That's
So
a
you'll
big
have-
influence
yeah.
on how I think on a daily basis. And so you're right. I think I might see a situation and, like a mullah, I think that's haram. That's, and then that's thinking, I'm enjoying myself here, doesn't have a clue what's going on, right?
Exactly,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just how we look at situations will be different based off our own sort of
Perception.
psyche and perception and how we're kind of hardwired, is it?
Exactly. And everybody's in a different way. So, and it links to judgment and being judgmental.
Yeah.
And when you learn about the principle, it stops you from being judgmental about people. And that is something that we should do as Muslims anyway.
So it helps you kind of process it a bit more with taking a step back.
Yeah, I
And
detach.
detach, seeing what's going on
Yeah.
rather than just using your natural sort of response.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then it links back to the thing I mentioned earlier, which is you work from a viewpoint of you have all the resources.
Yeah.
That's another presupposition that Shaykh, you have all ability within you to achieve what you want in life. It's just how do you access it?
Yeah, true.
And it links back
This
to
actually reminds me. Sorry, I'm coming
Yeah,
in like
carry on,
this,
carry on.
but it just reminds me. I want to share this point for the viewers because I do want to see where it fits in with the Islamic principles. It reminds me of a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where we just talked about the stepping back. There was an occasion where a group of people came to the Prophet ﷺ, like a delegation, and one of them went back and he didn't rush and he didn't come. He prepared himself, dressed well, and came to the Prophet ﷺ, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, there are two traits in you that Allah and His Messenger love. And he said, what are they? And the Prophet said, Al-Hilm, which is like forbearance and tolerance, and Anat, which means like deliberation, taking things sort of steadily. And which is from another hadith. The Prophet said, Al-anatu, which is deliberation, taking one's time, is from Ar-Rahman. And Al-ajalatu, being hasty, is from Shaitan. It's actually hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So I can see what you're saying when we jump to conclusions, when we're judgmental.
Yes.
Often it's a hasty decision usually.
Yep.
And what we're told by the Prophet ﷺ, that's satanic. That's not how you should do things. Take a step back, deliberate, think about it.
Relax, yeah.
Then, yeah, exactly. Then make a decision, and that's more likely going to be in line with the proper facts and, you know,
The reality of
the situation. Yeah, I think that's really important. Yeah, so I see that principle there as a very Islamic principle, just to take one's time and, you know, go beyond one's initial sort of emotional reaction, if you like. Yeah, get rid of the emotions.
Yeah, because emotions play a lot of, you know, they have a lot of weight in what we do and what we say and how we think. And I think it links to the next one, which is very, very good actually. It's all your behavior has a positive intention, which I mentioned earlier on. So our niyyah, so our fitrah, like you mentioned, it has a positive intention because that's how we were created. So under people's like misunderstood behavior, there's always something positive there. And a lot of what we do in NLP is used in addictions and in like inmates and, you know, prisoners and people who are like criminal, because it looks at how can we overturn that addiction and how can we change that behavior. And when you look at their inner, most innate like intention, it tends to be something good. I'm not talking about like your crazy murderers and stuff. I'm talking about petty crime and, you know, your criminals.
So they were doing things, but ultimately behind it all, they were trying to do something good or escape from something bad, or trying to help somebody or something like that. But it led to this sort of problem.
Wrong action.
And and that's now the situation they find themselves in. But ultimately they wanted to do something good.
Yeah, because they want to be understood.
Yeah.
But they're not able to communicate.
Okay.
And one of the last ones that I want to really touch upon is there's no failures, only outcomes. So you can never fail. And that principle, if you look at sports psychologists and like your Ronaldos and your Messis and your superstars who are very good at sport.
It's mentality, isn't it?
Mentality, Kobe Bryant and all these people, they don't believe in failure. They only believe in learning. So what I try to teach people within my program and on the one-to-one basis is that we look back at their past failures that are causing them traumas. And it's a very specific technique that we use. So we go back in time and we don't relive that memory, but we look at it from a disassociated perspective.
Okay.
That means that you go back into that memory. So you're in a nice relaxed state.
Yeah.
You go back to that memory and you look from a third person perspective. And what you do is you try to understand from that what caused you that trauma and look at it from a different angle and reframe it so it has a positive
So rather than it being holding you back and being negative, you try and get over it,
extract
turn it
the
into a positive. Yeah,
exactly.
Which is exactly what successful people do, isn't it? They don't consider a loss. It's a learning curve, right?
Exactly.
It's a growth. I mean, it reminds me of the example. I might be wrong. I think more people probably know better than me. But you know, the Harry Potter author, is it J.K. Rowling? They say she was like rejected like 15, 20 times for her books before she got published.
And
now she's like one of the biggest authors in the world, right? And multi-billionaire, I think billionaire now even, right? But had she stopped after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, she would have been nobody, right? Nobody, unknown. And her books, I mean, billions, probably, or hundreds of millions of people wouldn't have read her books, and Harry Potter wouldn't have been anything, right? So again, she didn't. She's a very successful person, but she didn't allow her.
Failures.
What would say? We'd say as we call them failures, but if you asked her, they weren't failures. They were just obstacles. They were learning curves. They were challenges that she fought through, and I think that's a very Islamic perspective as well, because we know from the hadith. I often quote this at Jummah. And I often quote it to brothers and people who ask for sort of advice. But the Prophet said, the affair of the believer, all of it is good. If he's afflicted with difficulty, he's patient, that's good for him. If he's afflicted, or if he's given goodness and he's grateful, that is good for him. So there's no real negative perspective, if you like. I mean, it's a negative in the sense you're ill, you have a difficulty.
But the perspective is
if you come through that in the right way with patience, with perseverance, what did the Prophet say? فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ. Then it is good for him, right? And this also reminds me of that mindset. Actually, probably the best hadith of mindset, just coming to my head now, which is the hadith of Ibn Abbas. A young boy as well. This is interesting because the Prophet wasn't giving a mindset to a 20, 30, 40-year-old. He was giving mindset to a 12-year-old boy, 13, 14-year-old boy. That tells us something, how we need to be early. In this, right?
Very early.
Yeah, so we're thinking of dealing with people after, but the Prophet setting the the foundation, if you like,
Yeah.
where it's a beautiful hadith where Abdullah ibn Abbas, who's a young boy, who's a cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's sitting behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a camel, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Oh young man," gets his attention, "Ihfadillah yahfadk," preserve Allah, watch over Allah, like the commands of Allah, fear Allah. Allah will protect you. Allah will look after you. Ihfadillah tajidu tujahak. If you look after Allah's commands and affairs and pay attention to Him, you'll find Him there for you. You'll find Him in front of you, literally. You'll find Him there for you, right? Ta'arraf ila Allah fi raha. Get to know Allah in times of ease. Ya'rifka fi shidda. He'll remember you in times of
Hardship.
difficulty and hardship.
Yeah.
And then there's a beautiful ending to this hadith where it's goes in the Qada and Qadar as well, where the Prophet says, and no, he's telling a 12-year-old boy, remember, if everybody were to get together to benefit you, they can only benefit you with what Allah has written for you. And if they were to get together to harm you, they can only harm you with what Allah has written against you. The pens have lifted, the pages have dried. And then he carried on in a different version. Know that victory is with patience. Inna nasra ma'as sabri. So victory comes through patience. Look, victory comes through patience, right? Wa innal faraja ma'al karbi. The deliverance, the getting out of the difficulty comes with the difficulty, right?
Yes.
Wa inna ma'al usri yusra. And with difficulty comes ease, right? And this is in the Quran as well. Inna ma'al usri yusra is a Quranic statement, mashallah. So that hadith literally spells it out for us. And he's teaching a young boy this mindset, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It literally is teaching a mindset. That's why I'm saying it's probably the best hadith that talks about, mindset of a Muslim and thinking
100%.
to get over those challenges, like we're saying, and see them as learning curves. 'Cause that's what the Prophet was telling him. You might get harmed, you might even benefit. Even the benefit is actually a learning curve, right? I mean, often for a lot of people, it can be a veil and a distraction. I've got all this, and they don't do anything with it, and it just goes to waste. Some people have had lots of money and just wasted it, and now I'm back in depression again. So even the blessing is a test, a challenge to use in a positive way, which is an Islamic principle. Whatever situation we're in, we've got to do our best according to that guidance. Yeah, mashallah.
100%. It reminds me of something. There's a very famous sports psychologist, and he's worked with a lot of top performers. His name is Bill Bezic.
Okay.
And he says that he rates the journey of going from like a sports person to winning and succeeding out of 10. He says achieving something is 2 out of 10, because when you win a gold medal or you achieve something, it's just a celebration. You just get what you want. You're done. But it's the process in between, which is 8 out of 10, which transforms people. And he says that is the most important thing, because to become a champion or to become a winner or to become successful, you have to go through a process. And it's that change that if people are willing to sacrifice their old self for a new version of themselves and go through that change, they can achieve that success. But the success itself is only 2 out of 10. The actual process is the 8 out of 10, which is putting the hard work in, the discipline, the patience.
That's nice.
And everything else.
That's where people struggle. They just want the success
straight away,
and they want that to be 9 out of 10, and they want to put 1 out of 10 effort in and say, like, I'll do that one part. It also reminds me of the idea of that spiritual growth in Islam. You've got to put the effort in. You've got to, maybe fast, read prayer, read the Quran, avoid sins. It's a struggle. And then we know that with all that struggle comes the openings, right? The gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come. So success is contingent upon your effort at the end of the day, right? And the effort is the major part of the journey, right? Is a huge part of the journey. So on that note, you mentioned some techniques, some, NLP, some words. I think you mentioned like anchoring, reframing. Good stuff, mashallah. But give us some, if you can, examples of how what you've done has helped people. Like, can you give us some examples of any case studies, and like how has it transformed the clients? How have they come through it? And like kind of give us something to.
So without going into too much detail, because I don't want to reveal too much about the people that I work with.
Much, but you just give us a basic kind of insight.
I'll give you common patterns and how I work with people, and what it takes them from and to the end state. Because what I do is I work with the present state and a desired state. So what your current problems are and what you want in life.
So you sit down and like have an assessment first and a discussion.
Yes, we have a proper my first actual session is a full-on map, plan, goal setting. What do you want? Where are you at now? What's the problem? Where do you want to be? Current state, desired state. Everything in between is what I need to use as a technique to help them out of the way. So for example, I can come to somebody who's got a lack of clarity in their vision and goals, for example, feeling a bit lost because they've come across a trauma in life. So what I'll do is, okay, so what's your trauma? They'll tell me what the trauma is.
So
where do you actually want to be? I want to be less stressed, less anxious. I want to be able to, have a bit more happiness. So what I do then is I break down the root cause of where that is coming from, and I can do that through assessments, and I can do that through techniques such as questioning. And it's a very, very powerful technique. Technique is questioning if you get it right.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to build rapport. So what I do is I build rapport, I get to know them. Okay, what's your internal state? What's your
Yeah, it's got to
filters?
be very, like almost like an interviewer. They have to get the questions to get the right
Yeah.
message or make it a good show.
Yeah.
For you, it's like we've got to ask the right questions so we
Exactly.
get the right information to help this person.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful tools or techniques that I use is submodalities.
Now, to explain that.
So I'll explain submodalities. So when I've figured out what their problem is and where they want to be, for example, anxiety. Right.
Yeah.
So I can say to that person, tell me of a time when you've actually felt really anxious.
Yeah.
And then they tell me a time, okay, that you've told me that's perfectly fine. So we put me in a nice relaxed state, close your eyes, go back to that time when you were anxious. Now replay that memory and tell me about that memory. What is it about that stands out to you? And this is where you're working now into like subconscious, but the subconscious of the subconscious, almost like Inception,
Okay.
you know, like the movie.
Yeah, Inception. I've seen. Well, I don't remember it very well, but I remember the movie.
So
Yeah.
they almost incepted this man's memory.
It's confusing to remember that movie.
They're very confusing. There's layers upon layers upon
Yeah,
layers.
that's it. Yeah.
So what you do then is you work on things like visual, audio, and kinesthetic feelings or taste and smell.
Okay.
So our five senses pick up on certain things and it records that memory within our subconscious through those five senses.
Okay.
So what we then do is we go into that memory and then we look at things like, okay, so tell me, if I were to turn up the brightness of this memory, how would it feel?
Mm.
So if you have a positive memory, you turn up the brightness and it becomes more emphatic and it records that in your subconscious and you feel that even more powerful. If it's a negative memory, you dim it down. So if you've got a phobia, for example, and this is something that I work with like anxiety and phobia, what we do is we go into that memory from a disassociated perspective, which means imagine this is you and you're looking at yourself in that negative state.
Yeah.
Turn down that memory, dim it down, darken it, take the sound down. And then what happens, the effect it has on the subconscious mind and the physical body, when you look at a person, you can tell when they're anxious and they're first in that memory, they're a bit tight, you can tell by the look on the face and the eyes are flickering and everything. You turn that memory down, the brightness, you turn it to black and white, you shrink it, and then you turn the sound down, all of a sudden they're relaxed.
MashaAllah.
And then there's another technique on the back of that, where you replace that memory with a positive memory. So you think of a time when you weren't anxious, you turn it up, you turn up the brightness, the color, the sound, and then you make that overpower that memory, and that's it. Boom. Done.
SubhanAllah.
And the amount of times I've seen people's expressions just change. It's like just the power of words.
Yeah.
The power of
it's
memory.
Getting them to think in that positive way or just get over the negatives and move on in a sense from it. Yeah.
Exactly.
But there's got to be a technique that takes them through that. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is it. So,
It's a very sort of subtle way of doing things, isn't it?
but this is it. It's a subtle way of doing things, and it's powerful in the sense that that person has got the resource to do it. They just need to know how to do it. But you've got to clear the way to be able to access those memories to be able to do that.
I think it's that building that sort of helping them build that self-confidence, resilience to fight through whatever it is they're doing. And I think we all want that. I think a lot of young people are struggling, and I think it's becoming more and more common. Like the Muslim mindset coach was probably not a thing. And I think this actually, for me, my perspective, I'm listening today and thinking, subhanAllah, this is more what sort of teachers, imams kind of need, because we get a lot of these issues come to us, and often we're like, we're not counselors, but we need to be mindset coaches.
I swear,
more than counselors, right?
I would recommend.
I've never thought of it like that.
I would recommend NLP to like imams and people in these kind of positions because it's very powerful. And
MashaAllah.
It's even something simple as reframing. I mean, I've got my own signature model, which is called 3D. So it's detached, decode, and direct. So you look at a negative event that's happened to you.
I'm going to steal that.
And
3D.
By all means, piece of that. So it's like you look at a negative event, you detach yourself from that event.
Yeah.
Okay. So you look at that and you detach yourself from it, and then you decode what's going on.
Wow.
So what is this actually trying to teach me? So you're taking the positive and then you direct that in a more powerful way. So you look at it, you detach yourself from the memory, then you decode what it means to you in a positive aspect, and then you direct it in a more positive, empowering way that's linked to Islam. So what is this actually trying to teach me, and how can I do the opposite of what I feel? And what that does is it redirects a negative event in a more positive way.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
So it's almost like having a positive outlook on life or being optimistic.
We've got a few comments come in. They just sent them to me, so I'm going to go through these. They're for you. Some are comments and then some are are questions for yourself. So first of all, it says reframing Surah Al-Baqarah. Perhaps you dislike something which is good for you. So this is the ayah of the Quran. And perhaps you love something which is bad for you. Allah knows. And you don't know, right? This is a famous ayah.
I have that in my course book as well.
Yeah, that ayah in the course book. MashaAllah, excellent.
Yeah.
So then there's a question, I think, here. It says, how can we use this technique to forgive ourselves for decisions we made out of survival, lack of guidance, or desperation? Sometimes we look back at choices we made 10 years ago and think, how could I have been so stupid? We keep blaming ourselves because those decisions shaped where we are today. How do we stop beating ourselves up for something our past self didn't know better? Yeah, that's a powerful question.
You know, I was thinking of this because I've got an actual tool for this as well.
Right.
So I was thinking of this exact thing.
That's a common one, that. It's a big one as well.
It's not, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's big.
It's
because,
big, yeah, because it's such a huge impact on your life from
massive.
before, what you did in your previous sort of decisions.
I've actually got a method that would deal with that, and it's about turning regret into gratitude.
Okay.
And it's a powerful one because it's something that can really, really, really weigh people down massively. Because if you regret an action in the past, it can stop you from doing a lot of things.
And it stuck with you as well. Yeah.
And in psychology and in NLP and all these different disciplines, there's different ways of dealing with it. But I find that there's 2 or 3 different techniques that really, really help. And one of them is looking at that regret and forgiving yourself and the people involved in that regret.
Okay, so forgiveness. Start with forgiveness. Yeah.
And forgiveness not just of yourself, but of others. But it doesn't always mean you have to forgive others. You've got to forgive yourself first.
Okay.
And understand how to turn that into gratitude.
Is it something like, because when you see forgiveness, one thing that comes to mind that people have come to me with is they're upset about their parents not doing stuff for them or doing stuff to them, and like, I'm upset with, it's a big thing, isn't it? To be upset with your parents is bad in the first place as a Muslim, but they may have wronged the child in their younger age and done things and so on. So you kind of have to forgive them and forgive that. Like,
it's not necessarily forgiving them, because sometimes, things that I remember there was a sister a couple of years ago when I was in a class, she asked a question about forgiveness, and it was very, very powerful because it was coming from a perspective of abuse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was quite deep.
Yeah.
And she was like, but what if you can't forgive?
Yeah.
But forgiveness sometimes isn't about forgiving the other person. It's about forgiving yourself for not understanding what was happening or doing what you could.
Because you could have maybe saved yourself had you known better. So you feel
could have, would have, should have.
Could have, would. Exactly.
And
that whole if, this, that, yeah.
But this is it. So this is something that I work with. It's an internal filter that disturbs people's mind. Could have, would have, should have. It's like a meta program that we call it. It's how you talk to yourself, and it disrupts a lot of things. So for example, in a situation where you're regretting something, you could have, would have, should have, but turn that into gratitude. What has it taught you now to make you a better person? And that's when it turns the page, because when people start to realize,
a bit like yourself, you mentioned, I went through some things, and now I'm using that to help other people even. So it's not about just yourself. You can even go further, can't
exactly.
you?
So how could you help?
So it shows you that potential you're talking about earlier. We've got so much potential from being in a state of sort of, I don't know, down, abuse or damage or whatever you want to call it. And yet you can go out and help people, and you can go out and support people and you can go so far. But it's just finding that journey and getting sort of moving along, which is life, isn't it? Which is tough.
It is. We're not built perfect, so we're never going to do everything correctly. But your mistakes kind of make you a better person. So it's a learning curve. So you have to turn that regret into a gratitude. And one of the most powerful things I've felt is when I do it with certain brothers and clients is that between the age of 0 and 8, we develop certain beliefs and patterns and stuff like this. So one of the exercises that we do is I tell that person, first of all, to forgive yourself a couple of years ago when that mistake may have happened, and then go back to that person that you were when you were 8, 9 years old, because that's a very critical phase in people's development. And I say to them, write a letter to your younger self, write it down, because writing down is a very powerful thing as well. Write down a letter to that person and give that person advice and tell them what's to come and prepare them for what you're going to become now, what you want to become. And also write a letter to yourself when this, regret happened or whatever, and tell them, you will make a mistake, but it's okay. It's a learning curve. You've got istighfar, you've got, dua, you've got these things.
Yeah.
And then once they write it and they read it, it turns a page. It softens the weight of that guilt, because it's the weight of the guilt or, the issue that actually weighs people down and puts them into like depression or like a dark place.
Yeah.
But you have to learn to let that go, to move
Yeah,
forward.
this is sort of linked a little bit. I think we mentioned it earlier before the podcast started. I think good point to bring it in is the idea of taking the means, whilst having trust, relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you trust in Allah, He's providing, He'll help you out, but then you've got to do something as well. You can't just do the du'as and expect things to change.
Yeah.
And we can't just think we can change it. We have to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ultimately in control, and He wants us to struggle. He wants us to take the means. That's like when you get ill. Good example is maybe illness. When you're ill, what do? You take medicine, you go to the doctor. But we know who's going to cure us ultimately is
Allah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we've got to combine that. We can't neglect one over the other. We can't sort of just say, okay, the medicine, and no du'as, no sadaqah, no Quran. You got to do all of that as well and combine them. I think this is something the Sahaba were really good at. Because they were taught by the Prophet ﷺ. They were the first generation who were living Islam and having that perfect balance, mashallah.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe where we are, Muslims are maybe on
Lacking.
sort of not lacking it, kind of balance on that. So maybe you're going to, which is a beautiful thing, to go to du'as and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then what are you doing about it? And some people are doing everything about it but lack a spiritual connection and worship. I think that's really important based off what you said, that we combine those two in our journey when whatever situation we find ourselves in.
But this is it. And who's the most forgiving? It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Exactly, yeah.
So if you're going to tie your forgiveness to a person or a human, you're leading yourself down the dark alley. But if you're tying your istighfar to Allah and you're relying on Him, then just leave it to Him.
Yeah. There's always a comeback. There's always a chance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't give up, in a sense, right? Despair is not something we have in Islam. It's not allowed, right?
It's not allowed, yeah.
And just on the idea of hope and forgiveness, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, everything we start, it mentions two names of Allah that are all to do with mercy and kindness, and how Allah has given us so much. And here we kind of, I think it's self-sabotage. We just spin everything negative often.
We do.
And we
we focus on the negative. Like, are we going to get punished? We're going to, this is going to happen, that.
That's it.
There's so many mercies mentioned in the Quran. Like, you probably know more about that. Like, there's so many things that mention in the Quran about Allah's forgiveness, rewards and everything else. And again, it's NLP.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the NLP as well. Because Islamic perspective is and principle is, and you see in the Quran, like you said, there is more mention of mercy. There is more mention of rewards than there is of punishments and warnings in the Quran. It's just how it works. Even the Prophet ﷺ, in his discourse, in his teachings, would always have a lot more positives and glad tidings and good news and like kind of upbeat kind of feel. And then there was times, so it's not something we neglect or have zero of. There were times of warnings, of mention of punishment and so on. But if you look at the
balance,
numbers, the ratios, there's a lot more positive than there was warnings and deterrence. Yeah, so that's something that you have in the sort of principles of mindset
within exactly. So, for example, positive attention and self-talk. Like, if you, depending on how you talk to yourself, your soul and your actions will react that way. So if you constantly tell yourself, and it's different to affirmations, because affirmations are purely writing something down and reading it and taking it in, but your self-talk is very different, and that develops, like I said again, between the ages of 0 and 8, from your parents, from your aunties, your uncles, your friends, and who you look up to. And if that talk is taken in, when you think about your most, hardest inner critic, whose voice comes in your head? Is it yours? Is it your mum's, your dad's? Is it aunties or uncles? Or is it somebody who you can think of? And that's when we can work with people. So, for example, if their inner critic is their dad's voice, that's it was quite tough on them when they were kids. Then we go into that voice and we tone it down.
Yeah.
We change it and we reframe it. And then, it changes the whole inner critic. And then until that doesn't fall away, it's like onions. It's like an onion, like layer upon layer upon layer.
Makes you cry.
It literally does it. It can make some, I'm not even lying when I say this.
I get the layer thing,
but it can literally make people cry because they don't realize just how much of an impact that's having on their lives.
Yeah, true.
And especially the inner critic, because if you can't control your inner critic, you can destroy your life.
Yeah.
And it's sad sometimes.
So on that positive note, what kind of transformations have you seen, in your experience, in your work, and examples you can give? Like you mentioned earlier, the gym one, people don't go and stuff. So that's the one we always think of, going to the gym and getting strong. But I'm sure you've experienced a lot of different ones.
Different varieties. Business goals, for example, somebody wanting to, move forward in their business, earn more money. They're unsure about whether it's going to balance their deen and dunya kind of thing. But then it's reminding them, look, like, because everybody's got this limited belief that money is evil, right? But if it was really that evil, wouldn't it be haram?
Yeah.
You can be.
Well, yeah, there are plenty of Sahaba with money, but they
Exactly.
used it the right way.
Exactly. So there's purpose behind earning money. So if you want to go from earning 5K a month to 20K a month, okay, but what's the higher purpose? And this is where it gets quite deep, because we have like logical levels and things like this, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But it's things like this: personal goals, business goals, from earning a certain amount. Oh, I don't want to earn so much. What am I going to do? It's going to affect my spirituality, and then help them move forward. Or, for example, sabotaging relationships, where they have a bad relationship with their mother or father, or tricky relationship, or they've got like certain character traits that are affecting their relationship, and they know. For example, quick to anger, or judging quickly, or getting frustrated very quick. And, moving it from sabotaging the relationship to actually building a strong relationship and going to a perspective where you can understand things better. Other ones include beating fears and anxieties, for example, public speaking or interviews or performing, sports. Oh, I'm scared to do this. I don't want to do that. But then moving into a place where, I can actually do that. I'm able to do it. I can do it while I'm myself. Even lacking confidence. Confidence is a big one, and self-belief is a big one. Confidence, like, I'm not confident, I don't want to do this degree, or I don't want to study that, or I don't want to go for this promotion because I don't think I'm good enough.
Yeah.
But why do you think you're not good enough? What makes you think you're not good enough? And there's certain ways I can ask questions to break that down in people's heads.
Yeah, so I'm listening to you now. It brings back a thought that, or a thing that I think we talk about more. We talk about mental health, really, and that is this idea of being resilient, and you haven't got any problems as Muslim, especially Muslim men.
You're tough.
You have to tough, and you can't
feel
open
anything.
up, and you shouldn't be vulnerable and stuff like that. So from your perspective, and not looking from a mental health necessarily, I mean it's all about mentality, I suppose, and mindset, of course. But just from your experience, like, are Muslim men opening up more? Is there misconceptions of this? How there's not much going on, like we said earlier. There's not many Muslim mindset male coaches or practitioners, but there's quite a lot of female ones.
There's loads, in our research.
So what for the brothers? I'm thinking, right? What can we do to help them get over these misconceptions or barriers?
But this is it. I mean, when I looked online for Muslim mindset coaches, there was hardly any men. There was Coach Taff, who I think is doing a lot of work, but he does counselling as well. So somebody else was available and visible online.
MashaAllah.
For us ourselves, I think there was me and there was another French brother or something, and the rest were all women. So women are doing the job. They're helping each other, but we're lacking in community.
MashaAllah.
And part of my program is to help build a community of brothers to help each other.
Yeah.
Have access to each other, to share their successes, their challenges in life. And I think men really do understand, and I don't mean no disrespect to the sisters out there, or mothers, sisters or wives, but men understand men problems.
Like from the perspective of what I've been through, it's hard for a lady to really come into your shoes, isn't it, and understand it fully.
A man can understand a man's problems,
and say, but women, they'll understand their problems better, right?
100%. So we, instead of putting each other down, we're there to build each other up.
And that's an important aspect of our deen, generally brotherhood, supporting each other. The Prophet said in a hadith, there's a huge hadith on brotherhood, right? The one of the famous ones, Imam Nawawi collects it in his 40 hadiths in Sahih Muslim, that a believer is the brother of a believer. He doesn't, لا يخذله, he doesn't abandon him. لا يحقره, he doesn't look down on him. لا يظلمه, he doesn't wrong him. The blood, the wealth and the honor of a Muslim is haram, is sanctified. In other words, haram means sanctified and sacred towards another Muslim. You can't wrong people in this way. And then there's a beautiful part of the hadith which says that Allah is in the aid of the slave. Wallahu fi awni al-abdi ma kana al-abdu fi awni akhi. As long as the slave remains in the aid of his brother. So this is what you were talking about. Beautiful. If you keep helping others, guess who's helping you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the word of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I think that principle you said right there of building a community, supporting each other, we really need to come together. We really hope, and the kind of what Guidance Sub is about, what we're about is like, bringing people together, giving a platform, coming together. You've been to the courses. I'm sure you remember the brotherhood we had and the sisterhood.
Made a lot of friends here.
Yeah, made a lot of friends, and you probably kept in touch with one or two people, and I got to know you, and I got to know your cousin and different people, mashallah, and so on. So alhamdulillah, it's like we need more of that, because that's how we are a strong community, when we support each other. It's the teachings of Islam, really. It's the root of who we are, the community.
I think it is definitely true. And I think one of the biggest issues I think we have is misconceptions that we have as Muslim men about like personal development and ourselves.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of people think that they can fix things alone. And that keeps people stuck for years.
100%. I think that's one I've come across as well. Especially they think they start fix themselves Islamically alone, or just generally. In nothing. Look, when you're ill, you go to a doctor, right? When you need to upskill yourself in IT or something,
You go
to an IT
college or
specialist. You want to learn to fix your car and become a mechanic, you go to a mechanic. This is how life works. You can be DIY, what do they call it? Book scholar,
Self-made or whatever,
self-taught,
yeah.
or cowboy, basically.
Yeah.
That's what we call them. But it's not the real thing. Who would you go to if you wanted to, an expert in the field, right? I want somebody
Exactly.
to teach me about, coding and programming. I want somebody to teach me about, building a roof or a house or fixing. This is something that
You
we
go to
have
the
to
specialist.
understand. Allah says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Go to the people who know, who remember. If you don't know, go to people of expert. فَاسْأَلْ بِهِ خَبِيرًا. Ask about him, the one who's khabira, expert, not just like knows, khabir, like is well versed.
Very interesting.
This is the chronic concept of going to people of knowledge, going to those who know for everything in life, really, but development, growth, success, and I think that's something we all need to really, have as a foundation in life, that we need to go and expose ourselves and sit with other people as
With
a
the right
community
people,
to benefit from everybody. And people, I came across something recently, it was amazing. I don't know, I've not really looked into it. I just seen a post on it, on a status, and it said, I think it was in Denmark. This is crazy, guys. Check this out, right? I think it was Denmark. I just saw a post on somebody's status, and it said, you can go to the library, get this right? You can go to the library, guys. I want the audience to listen to this as well. And you not borrow a book. You can borrow a person.
In a
You
library.
can take the person home and they'll come and they'll teach you, they'll guide you, whatever. Obviously, a person has certain expertises.
Right, okay.
So you can borrow a person like 24 hours. I literally go to the library. There's people there available.
To borrow and take
to
home
borrow
and
and take,
teach you
like,
something.
It's a library of people, not books.
Wow.
That's what they've got. I think it's in Denmark.
that's what we
right?
need. We
So
need
check
to-
that out. Like, weird thing came across. I didn't check it up. Like, I didn't research it after I saw it. But I was like, really? Is this true? And that's what the status said. So I believe it's true, and you can check it out. But point being in all of that is that, look, the people of Denmark or whatever in Scandinavia, it might have been, I think maybe Norway, Denmark, they have this principle of, if you need help from somebody in a certain field, we've got them here at the library, or there's a resource, right? I'm sure we can find other platforms that do this, right? But that's what it's all about. It's like engaging with the people to help you.
The experts in the field,
Yeah.
That brotherhood. I think that's something that's, I think in our previous generation, like my father's generation, they were very, very strong in that sense.
Yeah, that's right. I think
They
they,
were very, very
they help each other. I think that's something we don't often talk about enough, or even know. I think a lot of the younger generation, maybe the youngest generation now, those that are in their teens, let's say, or early 20s, they haven't even heard of that or experienced that. We saw it a little bit. We know our parents, we know the struggles of our grandparents and stuff, and how tough it was, and how much they supported each other, and the community in general. Just everybody helping each other, which really was a huge strength for us. Like it gave people so much opportunities, having that support network around them. And sadly to say, we are losing that a little bit. We're neglecting it a little bit. So I think that really coming together, and yeah, you're right. I think that's a more than a misconception. I think it's a big shortcoming in our communities, our elders maybe, or people of influence and decision making. Probably is a better way of saying it. Elders have done their job, mashallah, Allah bless them.
The knowledge and the wealth.
It's the next generation that need to really, see identify and take action in those areas. And I think we're just ticking boxes than doing anything else, and just trickling along with things, right? So anyway, as we come to the end of this podcast, and please do continue to comment and share. And if there's anything you want to ask, we've got a few minutes left, inshallah ta'ala. But I wanted to get on to sort of, if people are listening today, they've had a lot to digest. And always we want to give them some action to take away, some crucial information. What would you say to the Muslims out there in this field that you're in, of how to improve oneself, how to get out of a bad mindset into a good mindset? What can we do? What principles shall we have in life? How can we move forwards?
I think for people who want to get out of that mindset is lead your thoughts and emotions. Don't let your emotions and thoughts lead yourself. And I think this is a trap that we fall into. We think we are our emotions and thoughts. But when you start to lead your emotions and thoughts and use them in the right way, it can change everything. Decisions, habits, spiritually, emotionally, and practically. And when you start to lead your emotions and your thoughts and control them more,
Okay.
it's a
So
powerful
what you're
way
saying
of
is that we always try to
changing.
sort of fix things, but we need to start moving towards, go forwards, lead.
It's more to do with leadership.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, if I'm talking to somebody who's got mindset issues, one of the things and the principal base of this whole coaching and mindset coaching is that you are not your thoughts and emotions. You can lead your thoughts and emotions,
Right.
but don't let them control you.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
So when we start letting our emotions control us, we can go from here and there and all over the place. And same with thoughts. If we have negative thoughts and we let them overpower us, it can lead us down, dark alleys and stuff. So
That's Islamically what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be in control of our nafs.
exactly.
We're supposed to be disciplined, not let the nafs control us
Yes.
or influence us. Because that's what we do when you do all this, entertainment, enjoyment, and waste your time. We're allowing the ego to take over.
Yeah.
What you should be doing is saying, no, I've got to pray, I've got to fast, I've got to look after my family, I've got to be responsible. And that leading, like you said, I think that I can see what you mean by that, because it's a very Islamic principle you've just shared there, to be honest. So we can be leaders of our own selves in taking responsibility to do what's right. Because, as part of that, we mentioned it at the beginning, and it's important concept of that natural state of humans. We are actually created to be helpful, responsible, take on challenges, help other people, lead, like you said. That is leadership is part of who we are, right? It's really a human thing. And if we are shutting down, if we are stepping back, if we are disengaging, then they can only lead to more and more problems, right? It's going to be like everything's going to be fall apart.
Negative cycle,
right? So I love how you've put it into that one area, because if we take that mindset, that's going to lead us forward, inshallah ta'ala. So one of the things that I want to just talk about, actually, take a little bit of a step back. One of the things that I come across a lot, actually, with brothers in particular, is this feeling of loneliness, isolation, and that leads to all the problems they have, or that is a root cause. I just wanted you to talk about that a little bit. How do we get over that? What's that's a really important one for me to just share that today, because I think people listening would probably relate to that, or know people that would have that problem.
Loneliness and isolation, it can be quite difficult at times, and people feel trapped by their own emotions and thoughts. And the first thing I would say is, look, speak to somebody, seek help, speak to somebody who's wiser, and try to get a different perspective on it. Because when we're lonely and we're in that kind of negative cycle and that negative, loneliness and darkness and things, it can almost compound itself. But the first thing you need to do is, talk to somebody.
Yep.
And the one thing that really works for the people I work with is develop habits, good habits, and stick to them. Have some discipline in your prayer. Keep asking the dua and keep working on it. But most importantly, communicate, because you can't not communicate.
Yeah.
And that's a very powerful principle in NLP.
I mean, would you even say that if you're not saying anything, you're communicating?
Exactly, because communication is physical,
and
it's also vocal. So even without saying something, you're communicating. So even if you're sat there in a room with somebody and you want to tell them, but if that person knows that you've come to them for help and they can be able to read your body language, they should be able to tell you, like a therapist or a counselor or like an NLP practitioner. So go out, seek help. It's not as bad as you think it is. If you go out and you seek your help, you'll get the direction, and once you start taking action, the clarity will come.
Mashallah, I think that's important. I think, again, one element I would add on to that is that's really what we're about here at Guidance Hub, that you come to the classes, and it's not just classes. We've got BJJ going on right now, beautiful brotherhood there. You've probably seen the brothers all rolling around and stuff. We have classes for the ladies, coffee mornings. We have gatherings every week for brothers, monthly for sisters. So there's lots of activities we have, which is one of the main sort of objectives behind that, is so that our community has a space where they can come, socialize, get to know the people. But it's also protective. It's also Islamic to some degree. It also feels like they're not wasting their time or doing something pointless or whatever. The activities that are there are mashallah, all beneficial and good for our health and mental well-being, etc. So I think that's something that, again, I think maybe it's on the community to help, but that person, even if you got it here, he or she still needs to come and be a part of a community or find their way in, let's say. So, help others, bridge the gaps, I suppose, for others. Inshallah ta'ala. So we've got some final comments and stuff. Just want to share these.
Go for it.
So number one, A hadith mentions, he who knows himself knows his Lord. It's a saying of Yahya bin Mu'adh al-Razi, mentioned as a hadith. But yeah, true. The more we learn about our flaws and how to manage it, our weaknesses, our neediness, because that's the nature of a human, with the Quran and Sunnah, we can make positive changes. Being in good company is important. Yeah, so definitely, I think knowing yourself and your limits and your weaknesses, knowing then you'll realize how Allah can help you, bless you, and how you need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a question here. It says, how do we balance hastiness, which we talked about before, and procrastination in our decision making? That's a question. I don't know if
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, so we don't want to be hasty, and we don't want to, I think we talked a lot about not doing things and procrastinating. So how do you balance this is the question.
Interesting question, because there's actually what we call a meta program for this. So it's basically called...
When you say meta, is that to do with the mind? What do you mean?
So we call it meta. I'm getting very technical, but it's basically our inner language that we use when we talk to ourselves and our internal dialogue that goes inside. And it's the way we think. So with procrastination and hastiness, it reminds me of a concept called the towards and away meta program.
Right.
Procrastination comes from a protective strategy, which is just to not do something because you can't be asked. And that generally comes from when you want to work towards something, but you're running away from something.
Yeah.
So you're running away from something. So the motivation when you're running away from something is not as powerful as it is when you're moving towards something.
True.
So what we do is the best way to do that is to think about what you actually want to achieve and focus on that and move towards that and then slow that down. Because when you're running away from something, your motivation can be great to begin with, but then it'll die down and the procrastination kicks in.
It's like a fight or flight kind of thing.
Exactly, fight or flight. Flight or fight. So when you're working towards something, you then become in sync with it. You naturalize it, and then you realize that it
becomes more of a natural process, a positive building. You got a goal, because in the other one you kind of almost alarmed, agitated, trying to just find safety or get away from this.
Exactly,
and that's not like a healthy state to be in. It's not really productive. To be like that. So I see you got to kind of get shifting that mindset of how to look at the situation you're in to make a positive response and progress forward.
Because how you think and what actions you do affect your physiology and your psychology. So if you're trying to run away from something, you're anxious, stressed, and that can end up in procrastination, and that's one of the biggest motivates for procrastination. But if you're working towards something and you've understood this goal and you've conceived it in your head and you want to win or you want to achieve that, you'll find ways of getting there without being hasty and nervous and anxious. So it's like almost slowing down and just taking a breath, understanding what you want, breaking it down and moving towards it.
Yeah, so we've got a question, I think, or a comment. Let me just check it on the video here, the comment section. It says, being in a gathering of dhikr can also help the heart feel at ease. Helping and supporting each other with our flaws and shortcomings can have a significant impact. I would say that, we know that ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub, isn't it? By the remembrance of Allah, surely hearts do find rest. So do be in an environment. Like I said at Guidance, so we do these kind of gatherings. We really want people to come and feel that. It does help. It does support a lot. So before we go, I want to ask you two things. Number one, how does somebody get in touch with you? Have you got an Instagram page? Have you got a website? What kind of, what's the process?
So I've recently started to try to get onto online platforms. So I am on Instagram at the moment.
Your Instagram, what's your handle thing?
So my handle thing is Waqqar Mirza, my full name.
Yep.
_ mindset coach.
Mindset coach. So if we link that in the comments of a YouTube video, people can follow you and
they can message me,
message you on Instagram, etc.
And I'm more than happy to have a chat. And then on there's a link as well to my calendar, so people can book a consultation.
Okay, so you've got a system,
so it's a full system. So you can book a free consultation with myself and we have a chat, see what your problem is and if I can help you or not.
And
then if it's a much more serious problem, because I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist,
there's
certain things.
And I love that about you, and I'm similar to that. Like often people come to somebody, an imam, and think he can solve all his problems, and he's an expert psychologist and counselor and this, that, and we're limited in our experiences, and and I'm very clear about that as well. And I love that fact that you're saying that, look, if I can help and it's something within my skill set, Bismillah, I will be happily and positively and help you. And if not, I'm not going to lead you on and say
100%.
It's not like that.
That's the worst thing I can do.
You're very genuine of you, mashallah ta'ala. So excellent. And then finally, what is your parting advice for today? What message would you like to leave with our viewers? I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. I found this very refreshing. I've found a lot of links to Islamic principles and viewpoints that really go together with this. And I think this conversation itself on mindset, rather than the psychology and the trauma and the kind of sort of, well, like I said, it seems a bit negative or downbeat, looking in a positive, which is very Islamic. That's why I've really resonated with this and found it to be quite refreshing. So what kind of final message would you want to leave with everyone?
Action brings clarity. That's the big thing that I would say. It says if you're stuck in a problem, you need to take action, and then everything appears, and put your trust in Allah. I mean, tie your camel.
Yeah, that's an action, isn't it?
That's an action.
Yeah, tie your camel. Do what you got to do.
And
take
then
the means.
Most often I found is when you take an action, things just become clearer and things appear for you.
Yeah, mashallah, alhamdulillah. So we just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Waqqar, for being a part of the podcast. Any questions from our audience here? I did ask one of our new audience members. If he comes, he has to ask a question. I've not received one from Brother Bilal. We might as well give him a shout out in the background, I think from Stretford. You got a question? Come on, Bismillah. Are you posted it on the comments? Okay, so that it was in the comments. Thank you for sharing that in the comments. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you to everybody for tuning in today to what I found to be a very refreshing, informal, informative and helpful podcast, right? Thank you. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you to Brother Waqqar. Take care, everyone. Do share the video. Do let others benefit from this. I think it's very important people have this conversation and understand what's going on in this part of our lives, in our communities, and helping others. But yeah, thank you, everyone. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.